back to the Today Show, and spicing up our life is Bilal Vakani here from Sirius XM 167. Where can people learn more about you? Are you on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter? What are you on?
I am on Instagram and Twitter at BilalV87. I think you and I were talking before about how focused our industry is on Twitter, right? So a certain level of video content I can get on Instagram. As anybody who posts video on Instagram will know, anything over 59 seconds, it's not happening. So
Right.
if you want sort of, those extended 1 minute 20, 2 minute clips, you got to go to Twitter at BilalV87. And, speaking of a little bit about myself, I have to speak to my Halton roots because I know Halton Today is your show.
Yep.
And I was born in Toronto, but, once my family had my little sister, they moved to Oakville. We had to stop off in Burlington, but that's still part of Halton. When I was 5 or so, and from the age of basically 6 to 22, I grew up in Oakville, went to Sheridan College, also in Halton. And, I will say I got to go to high school with Steve Mason, who became a great goalie in the NHL, who you should really come on your show because you are the master of Halton. And, it's a very, I will just say, it's a very, very, I miss it. It's a very, very nice place. I'm now very much downtown in the city. I'm not quite in the center of the center, although I was a couple of years ago. Now I'm a little bit on the west end of the city, but it's such a nice place. And I believe there was a provincial election where somebody pointed out my sort of subredding of Halton was legitimately the most affluent in Ontario. And then it kind of clicked in. It's like that's why everything's nice and there's a Starbucks everywhere. So it's a very very nice place to live and to raise a family. I don't know if Ontario you could really top it because you know every 5 minutes there's a Starbucks or a grocery store and it's such a beautiful place and honestly I miss it a lot. And yeah, I just wanted to shout out Halton before we ran out of time.
No, no, I appreciate that. And say, listen, if you want to make an introduction, more than happy to chat with anybody, of course. But um, you did lead on to this wrestling part, which I
Hmm.
want to ask: are you a wrestling fan?
I'll keep this short. I'm a massive nerd. Under this button shirt, I have a wrestling shirt, which I won't bore you with. Um, I love wrestling, right? Like I was a young kid in the Attitude Era, and my wife's a bit of a wrestling fan. And I think part of the thing in the role I'm in now is you want to differentiate yourself, right? Like I spoke to a lot of the people who are on our channel. Mansbridge and Bob McCowan are not going to interview wrestlers. That's not their bag. That's my bag, and that is one of the things that really your passion can really differentiate you, right? Like I was just big upping Halton, and you're right, I got to connect you with James Hinchcliffe and some other great Halton people because I've interviewed some of these people, but like you are the Halton guy. I'm the guy who just has fond memories of Halton. But I think I encourage everybody, like whatever your passion is, pursue it. Like on top of all the stuff I do a wrestling podcast completely as a hobby with a couple of friends, and then I bring people on who I wouldn't necessarily bring on Sirius XM always, but people who are friends of mine who I feel comfortable saying, okay, I want to talk about a pay per view for like an hour, half an hour, and let's just hang out. Um, and I've had like 145,000 people listen to my hobby above and beyond like the Sirius XM thing where I'm working with McCowan and Mansbridge who have like in the tens of millions of downloads. But I think if there's only one thing people take away from this interview, pursue your hobbies, right? Like we're all nerdy about something, and I love F1 too. We won't get into that, but pursue them, enjoy them. Start a podcast about them, or if you're not into podcasts, start a Facebook group, like start a group chat. Just do something, right? Like I just think those experiences and those joint experiences, they're so special, and it's not proprietary to wrestling. It's whatever you're into, assuming it's not criminal. But it's just great to share those things, and I've been so lucky where you know the only feedback I might get sometime from my bosses is like, don't just interview wrestlers, which is pretty good feedback because if I did that, I would alienate 99.9% of people. But other than that, I have been so encouraged by my coworkers at SiriusXM Canada to do the big interviews. And if anything, they usually step away from when I mention the numbers I do on those, the Tony Khan interviews, where a company like AEW, which has a million Twitter followers, would be like, we'll retweet that. That's amazing you talked to Tony Khan. And they seem to like me. They'll step away and say, damn, that wrestling stuff's pretty popular. Don't do it all the time. That's pretty popular, Bilal. And that's good enough for me. And I implore everybody to find their, I wouldn't even say niche, find your passion, make it as much a part of your life as you can.
I have time for one more question for you, Bilal. What makes you smile?
Pretty much everything. I'm a very positive guy, except when my wife watches a show I don't like, and then I eviscerate it. But when she tells me to stop, I do stop generally. But yeah, I try to find the joy in everything I do. I worked with a couple of guys in the International Sports Report very early in my career. It was the first regular gig I had at TSN 1050, and I won't try to do a New Zealand accent, but basically, this former rugby player who's still a friend of mine to this day, he basically told me, like, we're all kind of doing the same thing, but if you can have some fun while you do it, like, that's it. Like, if you can joke around a bit, if you can smile, and somebody else along the way, and I'm probably taking this from somewhere else, basically said, if you have fun, everybody else, or at least some portion of people, is going to have fun with you. And, I'm a big proponent in all that. I'm not someone who's super controversial. More often than not, I'm the nice guy who comes in, is very knowledgeable about most of the things I'm talking about, and I will work in a joke here or there. And typically, what I see is those big name guests, a lot of which I alluded to, will turn around and say, "That's actually pretty cool. I want people to check out the interview I did with Bilal." And, we are but two humble Canadians. When we have big name US guests, if they can amplify us, um, I think that's the best case scenario because, you and I will probably put roughly the same amount of work into everything we do, but it's working smart and well, I guess we work hard anyways, but more smart than hard and finding that sweet spot of, you know, taking a discussion and saying, this little clip is what I think the other person would like to share from our discussion and giving them my platform, they're giving me their platform. And I think that sort of collaborative approach has really been what sets me apart and does make me happy because, you know, anytime Duff Goldman or John Shannon or any of these guys retweet something I do to 160,000 followers, I'm like, oh, well, I had a nice time talking to them. And now more people might smile or learn about this person's book or this person's TV show. And I think ultimately that's like all we can aspire to in our industry.
100%. That's wonderful. Listen, that's the time that we've had for our show. I'm your host, Christopher Power, on the Today Show. Our guest, Bilal Wakani from Sirius XM Channel 167. Remember to have a fantastic day and smile to inspire. Thank you.